Now, this week, we had another chapter written in the story of LOL TNA. We've had many chapters to this book. This book is as big as Moby Dick. This week, this is how it started per PW Insider on Wednesday. They heard from multiple sources that former TNA champion Moose was set to perform at the Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling Multiverse show in Las Vegas on Friday. But after TNA approved the appearance, there was a change made, and Moose was pulled from the event before MLP could officially announce him. The belief is Moose would have been in the ring with talents from another promotion, likely AEW. And the stories making the rounds is that TNA would not want their talents in the ring with talents from opposing promotions, especially if those events could stream live or be taped for future release. The concern, based on what we are hearing, seems to be centered around the idea that someone could conceivably show TNA talents in a bad light or losing on rival programming. Whether that is a concern that AMC brought up now that they are carrying TNA, or something TNA partner WWE voiced concern over, PW Insider cannot confirm at this time. AEW Collision and TNA Impact went head-to-head for an hour that overlapped last Thursday, with TNA's usual audience dropping off specifically during that hour. Again, whether there is a connection there is unknown at this time, but it is interesting timing. So that was several days ago, and then Dave Meltzer was talking about how there's talk that the MJF Nick Nemeth match that was scheduled for the Create a Pro show on May 1st, it was still on, but it could be in jeopardy. And the match between Ricochet and Leon Slater in Vegas this week that was scheduled for the Mark Hitchcock Super Show on April 16th could potentially be in jeopardy. Mark Hitchcock, for those who don't know, was a huge wrestling fan who used to design, I think, DVD covers and other artwork for High Spots. And they have a memorial show named after him in his honor after he passed away. I think there was an accident sometime back. So that's who that is. But anyway, Sean Ross Sapp then was reporting that TNA president Carlos Silva said that some TNA talent have been pulled from shows due to, quote, partner conflicts. And both PW Insider and Fightful Select reported that Moose had been pulled from MLP Multiverse after having previously been granted approval for the show. And it was also said there were growing concerns that TNA was moving towards a scenario where its talent would not be permitted to work with talent from AEW or other companies at all. And in fact, what ended up happening is that the MJF Nick Nemeth match, which they were doing a hell of a job of really building up on social media and on Busted Open Radio, they were really promoting that match hard. And I know it's a match both guys have wanted for a long time. That match has been canceled, as was the Ricochet Leon Slater match. But we got this statement here from Pat Buck, the owner of Create a Pro, which is where MJF trained and cut his teeth. So, of course, Create a Pro means something special to him. Of course, he's going to be doubly upset about all this. But Pat Buck put this statement out the other day. He said, "I don't usually speak on things like this, but this one's too ridiculous to ignore. TNA, specifically Carlos Silva, forced a change to the main event of our Create a Pro show 3 weeks out after it was already approved and promoted. Not sure who that helps. Create a Pro is a training school with a promotion focused on developing talent while running consistent live events. Or a school, dojo, and a mom and pop business, just with two dads. Live events are a necessary training tool, and they're disappearing even at the highest levels because they're not as cost effective and the money is in television. In a direct way, we are providing a service for your talent to make money and keep their skills sharp. Do you not see that? We train wrestlers for wrestling companies. And now a wrestling company has stepped in and hurt another wrestling company that helps wrestlers get to wrestling companies. Makes perfect sense. Maybe I'm the one missing something. I'm annoyed, as it's hard to ignore how unnecessary and honestly how cringe this situation is. And to be fair, talent wasn't pulled, but altering a main event match like that on our limited stage has had or has the same impact. Because MJF is still going to be on the show, and Nick Nemeth is still going to be on the show. They're just not going to be wrestling each other. But he says anyone who actually promoted shows understands that. When something changes that affects another promoter's show, you make it right. Whether that means sending talent, strengthening the card, or finding a way to return value, you don't just create the problem and walk away from it. That didn't happen here. And if any attempt is made now to make it right, it's a bit too late. You meet people with grace, not chaos. Create Pro isn't a competing media company. It's a training ground that built its own platform to develop talent. No TV deal, no streaming, and we're not attached to any bigger company yet. Between Create Pro / Wrestle Pro, we run around 25 events a year and reinvest back into us, our leases, rings, and the equipment needed to put on the shows. Equipment that at one point your company needed to rent to operate in this market. And at another point, when your company needed content and additional matches, talent was placed on Create Pro and Wrestle Pro shows because there wasn't enough content to support it. Did anyone let you know about a past positive relationship? Years ago, your company used our students for extra work in a meaningful way. Now it looks more like carrot dangling, ring crew, and helping with catering, but that's an entirely different conversation. Create Pro has a pipeline and a support system to just about every major company in wrestling. Most people know that. Unless you ask the WWE ID program, then we apparently don't exist. I'm willing to believe Carlos may not know who I am, and that's fine. But if you're in an executive position, you should probably understand the room you're operating in and the etiquette that comes with it. Maybe Tony Khan can give a quick crash course on how to protect your brand while still helping the overall scene. It's times like this I'm glad to work for someone who actually champions the entire sport, not tries to shrink it. And yeah, I'm on the payroll, but these words are from experience, not influence. At the end of the day, we'll adjust like we always do, but if the goal is to grow this industry or even your own company, this isn't the way to do it. And then he signed it, Pat Buck, Create Pro founder and trainer, AEW VP of Talent Development, and one of the adults in the room. And there may be some people who are going to discount what he said there because, yes, he does work for Tony Khan. He gets a paycheck from Tony Khan. But there was nothing in what he said there that was wrong. And you could understand his anger and you can understand his frustration. Nick Nemeth commented on Busted Open Radio sounding very dejected over all of this. He said, I was really looking forward to this. I was really excited. But yes, as of yesterday, as I was flying in, I found out because of certain partnerships and brands, TNA President Carlos Silva had to make a difficult decision and protect a couple of brands down the line, and things are actually contractually obligated to happen. Can't just kind of do whatever we want. Even though I think some things we approved or were approved at a different time, when it became the situation that it is now with a couple of different things happening at once, I feel like I'm crushed because I was very much looking forward to doing this, but it's unable to happen at the moment. And then he was also giving another interview later on to Youngstown Studio Productions, and he opened up a little bit more saying, a lot of things happened at once. Our president, Carlos Silva, is very open when it comes to a lot of things, behind-the-scenes deals, things people don't always know about, we put out there. He's very open to constantly being here. Here's why I can't do this thing. We had a phone call. He said because of certain deep into contractual obligations, certain companies might have crossover with certain other companies that we are with a rival or a streaming service or a cable company. And he says, because of the situation, and it's debatable, there's a few of them, we have to do the right thing now. It's going to be a hard choice, but long term, it covers their butts legally for everything. MJF was not happy about any of this. And when the news broke that the match was off, he said, Nick Nemeth and TNA are afraid of the AEW World Champion. Shame old Carlos doesn't care about the fans or his roster getting paid. I'll still be there at Create Pro. Let's see if Nikki still has the balls to show up to Long Island. To those curious, Carlos pulled Nemeth off the match prior to my tweet. And then he quote tweeted a post from Cultaholic that said, report TNA President Carlos Silva unhappy about AEW Collision airing at the same time as Thursday Night Impact. Which is unconfirmed that that's the reason. But MJF replied to it and said, it's called being preempted due to March Madness. This guy is actively a dumb motherfucker. Congrats. You pay your talent shit, then force them off shows where they can make money. Hashtag LOL TNA. And the problem with that being the reason is Collision gets bounced around because of sports all the time, right? They have the NCAA stuff on TNT. This was not some big surprise. This was scheduled for many weeks, and that's why Collision got bounced. And so it doesn't make any sense that Carlos Silva or TNA would hold that against AEW because Collision got moved to a Thursday and one of the 2 hours overlapped with their show and took some viewers. It doesn't even make any sense. It wasn't even an AEW decision. So that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I'm not sure that really is the reason here. But he wasn't done. MJF was not done. I told you he was hot, this guy. He was fucking pissed off. And on Thursday morning, he called into Busted Open Radio, talked to Dave LaGreca, and he dropped his own pipe bomb. I didn't think anything would top CM Punk's promo from Monday in terms of how scorched earth he went on different people, but then MJF just casually went and dropped one of his own. He said, "I'm in a rotten mood, okay? Matter of fact, I'm in one of the worst moods I've ever been in my entire life, and I feel horrible because I've got a living legend here in Natalia who's going to have to listen to me rant and rave. Natty, I apologize to start off to you. You're a wonderful woman, the only Canadian I've ever gotten to. I've not met you in person, but the only Canadian that I've gotten to know outside looking in that I don't think is a complete idiot and a talentless loser." What I love about this is, of course, this is playing off the fact that he's wrestling Kenny Omega, who's a Canadian, this weekend. So he kind of ties it into that. But he says, now I'm about to talk about Dynasty. But before I do that, I want to say one more thing. Natty, what you and TJ are doing right now for wrestling in general is incredible. And I think it's awesome how much you guys are helping young talent. And now I would actually like to speak on young talent a little bit. Let's talk about TNA and the fact that they are pulling young talent off of shows when they're barely paying them any money whatsoever and telling them, hey, you can't wrestle because there's a guy from another promotion that's wrestling on this show. Does that help young talent grow? Does that help? Does that help young talent become better inside the squared circle? Moreover, does that help young talent put food on their plate and on their table so they can eat? What Carlos Silva is doing is disgusting. And if anybody supports him or that company at this point, it is very hard for me to wrap my head around. Now let's talk about the fact that Nick Nemeth is completely terrified of me, and all of this, in my opinion, is just some blatant weird conspiracy and excuse because he knows that if he gets inside that squared circle with me, he is done for. And then from there, he seamlessly segued into a promo on Kenny Omega to promote his company's pay-per-view tonight. Or as he put it, the biggest show happening in April. This man is fantastic. This man knows what he's doing. But I'll tell you one of the most embarrassing parts about all this. Last month, Nick Nemeth, in hyping up the match with MJF, said he thinks MJF is counting on Tony Khan to step in and cancel their match. I'm just like, holy shit. That aged like milk, didn't it? Now, on the Dynasty media call on Thursday, Tony Khan said that MJF and Ricochet both asked him directly about the matches against TNA talent, and Tony approved them. He said, "I love collaboration, and I was surprised to see those matches had been changed as a result of the other company not wanting their wrestlers involved." And he said MJF and Ricochet both came to him with the idea of working those shows, and he had no issues with either one of them. Sean Ross Sapp said later that the issue is specifically dealing with TNA talent against AEW talent. And he says TNA does not pay talent enough to keep them from doing indies basically at all. I mean, they can't say, no, you can't do indies all of a sudden because there's a lot of talents that work every fucking weekend doing indies. And unless you start reworking all of their contracts, how are they going to make up for that lost income? This is specifically an issue with AEW. And the question is why? Why all of a sudden is this an issue when it wasn't an issue before? Now, the answer that he gave to Sapp was partner conflicts. When I hear partner conflicts, that means one of two things. It means either WWE or AMC. And I don't think AMC gives a shit about TNA wrestlers wrestling AEW talents on independent shows. So that only leaves one answer here. And this is a terrible look for TNA. It's a terrible look for Carlos Silva for a lot of reasons. Pulling Leon Slater from a match on a memorial show, for one. Pulling talent this close to the shows when things were already agreed upon previously and tickets were sold. But also, they had no issue with Indy Hartwell beating Deonna Purrazzo last month in House of Glory, or Jody Threat beating Mercedes Moné for her Winnipeg Pro women's title. Only now, weeks later, does it become an issue. You know, it may have been WWE dropping the hammer and telling Carlos no more, but boy, that makes it look really bad, right? Let's get these matches out of the way first, and then all of a sudden, nope, we can't work with these people anymore. That's a bad look, right? Let the TNA stars get their wins and then pull everybody else after that. TNA had its Rebellion show last night, and Carlos Silva got booed on the pre-show when they introduced him. He's become the villain in this story. Rightly or wrongly, he's the one who made the final decision. He felt it was more important to keep WWE happy, even if that meant fucking over a bunch of promoters and the fans who paid money to see those matches. And even worse, one of those promoters is Brian Myers, who works for TNA. They screwed over one of their own talents in the process with no make good, no nothing. But you know who did get to play hero this week in this story? Tony Khan. WrestleCon needed a new main event for their memorial show, and now they have one. It's going to be Ricochet and the Gates of Agony against Jet Speed and Michael Oku. Oku's going to have a busy day, by the way. He's doing that match in the afternoon. And then a few hours later, he's wrestling Charles Mason for the HOG World title. But that's a rematch from the Forbidden Door pre-show last year. That was the match, if you remember, where Toa Leona, he pounced Michael Oku over the top rope. And Oku took this horrendous landing where he almost broke his neck. Like, I still don't know how he didn't. The way he landed was just sickening. But WrestleCon said it took some exceptions to make this match happen on our little independent show to honor our friend. And we want to personally thank Tony Khan and AEW for allowing this to happen. When we lost our main event, we had several wrestlers, management, and agents reach out and offer their help. Thanks to everybody that had a part in putting this one together. So all's well that ends well in terms of at least they got a big match. I mean, it's not Ricochet against Leon Slater. That would have been a kick-ass match to have. But yes, whatever is going on behind the scenes right now, and I'm sure it involves WWE. And Carlos Silva, in the position that he's in, has to make a decision about what is the most important thing here. He has to weigh the pros and cons. He's got this partnership, this multi-year partnership with WWE. And WWE wants to start playing games, and he has to be subservient to his partner if he wants to maintain the relationship. I don't know about Nemeth was talking about there being legal and contractual obligations. But apparently those legal and contractual obligations didn't exist a few weeks ago. Only now, all of a sudden, do they exist. And so as a result, he and TNA have been dragged. They have been raked over the coals all week long, and deservedly so. This is the price you pay. It is a terrible, terrible look for TNA in this case. And Tony Khan read the room and said, hey, I have the chance to do the funniest thing ever here. I could ride in on my horse and I could be the hero, right? Riding in and saving the day. That's exactly what he did.